Hey, if you're a fan of the band Styx, you are going to really enjoy this video. What I have here is a couple of newspaper articles that were written back in 1981. And these were reviews of the concerts that they were playing on while they were touring with Paradise Theater. And these things are so fascinating. I have one where they do a review that is really, really positive, and another one where the review of the concert is fairly positive, but the guy really doesn't like Styx. And it's fascinating listening to how these people talked about what was going on in this band at this, especially Styx. This was kind of the Paradise Theater time in Styx history was pivotal. That album, I don't know. I think about Styx a lot, and I think where were the real pivotal changes? Paradise Theater was one of those things that changed kind of the trajectory of what they're doing, because it led to Kilroy Was Here, which derailed everything. But it was this album, Paradise Theater, I've got it right here, that really set that next album up. But as far as the big pivotal moments in Styx, I actually sometimes want to go back and say it was actually the Grand Illusion. Because Grand Illusion was when, of course, they had the song Grand Illusion, but then they had the song Come Sail Away. And that one just became such an anthem. And then that led to the next two more albums after that just became these really, really big selling albums, because you had Pieces of Eight that came out right after that had Blue Collar Man and Renegade, which were two huge hits. And then you had the next one, which was Cornerstone, which had Lights, which is a great tune. And then that's when the song Babe, I think that's what the song that one was on. And that, boy, Dennis DeYoung puts out that ballad. And I don't know that the other guys like James Young and Tommy Shaw really liked that feeling that they were going in that direction. Because Tommy Shaw and James Young were rockers. And then you had Dennis DeYoung, who was over here doing these ballads, trying to push the band towards show tunes or concept albums, which is what this really was. This is Paradise Theater. And I'm going to show you something really cool about this album. So when people come into the studio here, we have a huge 2000 album record collection. And it's one of those centerpieces when people come into the studio. Of course, people like to go look at them and see. And one album that I pull out frequently just to show people because it's so cool is this album, Paradise Theater. And it's pretty cool. Not just because I like the band and the music. Here's the front cover. It is kind of a concept album about this theater that opened up, I think it was in 1928 and then closed in 1958. And they talk about this in the articles, and it's so cool listening to them talk about this. But so then they have the opening and closing. But what's really neat about this album is the record. And this is what I show people. So check this out. If you've never seen this, you're going to totally dig this. So on the front of the album, the label right there, very simple, nothing too special. It just has the track list, but it does do something kind of unusual. One special thing. It has the side one track on the track list on the left, but it lists side two on the right. Usually what they do is they'd put side one on this side and side two on the other. But if you flip the record over, hey, hold on for just a second. We'll get right back to the video. But if you like this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we really, really appreciate it. Anyway, with that, back to the video. You see that it's just black. There's nothing there. Well, the reason they did it, and this is what's pretty neat. If you look right here and you see the word Styx kind of going around that label, and then you see these two kind of angels going around along the side. When you flip the record over, I'll try to hold this so you can see it. You'll notice that they recreated that label in the vinyl. Hopefully you can kind of see it. And it kind of comes and goes as I'll move it. But with a little bit of luck, it's hard for me to tell if it's visible on the monitor over there. But anyway, it's a pretty neat thing. And so I'll show this to people because there weren't a lot of bands that ever did this. There were a few singles that we have that have it. And then another band named Split Ends I think we have some videos out talking about that album. They did something similar to this, but in theirs, it was on both sides. But in this case, they didn't put this label over here, but they put that etching, which is pretty cool. So I show that to people when they come in the studio, because it's one of those kind of neat things. One of the reasons vinyl was so cool was all these little Easter egg things like that you'd find that were kind of fun, that made it unique. So I want to read these two articles to you and what they are, again, this is during the tour of when they were on Paradise Theater. And I think you're going to get a kick out of the way these guys talk about it. So this first review, the one that's more positive, this is from February 9th of 1981 in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. So the album came out in 1980, and here they are in 1981 going on this tour. And this review of the album and the concert is, it's pretty cool. So here we go. By Roger Kay, Star-Telegram, rock music writer. Dallas. The Paradise Theater reopened in spectacular fashion at Reunion Arena Sunday night as Styx successfully managed to transfer its Paradise Theater album concept onto the stage and onto what turned out to be an impressive rock and roll review. Prior to the performance, keyboardist Dennis DeYoung had promised something out of the ordinary on this tour, and Styx delivered it. With a near flawless 2-hour evening of music built around the Paradise concept. The Chicago Rockers have been the recipient of some brutal press reviews in the past, but they don't deserve them. They're willing to take chances with their music, and they succeed. They're willing to take chances with their stage show, and they certainly succeeded on that count Sunday night in a show that was filmed for worldwide showing. With all that in mind, the only conclusion one can draw is that this is a great band. The show wasn't flawless because sound problems martyred the first of the night's 18 selections, Rockin' the Paradise. The first of the night's 18 selection, Rockin' the Paradise, which is that was one of the cool songs that came off of this album. This album, by the way, Paradise Theater, it's probably not my favorite album by them, but it is a solid one because it has that. It's the one that has it has Too Much Time on My Hands, which is a great tune. Anyway, there's a lot of really cool stuff on this. Like I said, and it's kind of a concept album. That caused some anxious moments among the sellout crowd of 17,000. Seats behind the stage weren't sold. But everything worked fine after that, as DeYoung, Tommy Shaw, James J.Y. Young, and brothers Chuck and John Panozzo, I don't know how to pronounce their last name, reeled off such classics as Blue Collar Man, Lights, Lady, Crystal Ball, Foolin' Yourself, Miss America, Babe, Renegade, Come Sail Away, and Borrowed Time. Now just listen to that. That's a list of some pretty well-known, successful, popular songs. They actually did have a lot of hits. And one of the interesting things that a song that kind of became a staple for them, Lady, was off of their second album, Styx 2. And it's still it became kind of a touchstone for them. But Tommy Shaw wasn't even in the band when they put that song together. Dennis DeYoung had recorded that long ago. And Tommy Shaw didn't join the band until I think it was their 6th record. So anyway, on the band's current tour, billed as the largest in rock history, Styx is attempting to recreate Chicago's old Paradise Theater within the confines of the arenas it plays. And Reunion stage Sunday night resembled an old movie theater stage, complete with curtains and a flashing Paradise sign above. The curtains were opened at the start of the concert, revealing a cleanup man mopping the floor of a closed theater. DeYoung then appeared, leaned on an old piano, began to sing, and bring Paradise to life again. Now, when I said that this album set the stage for Kilroy Was Here, this is an example of it. Because there was tension between Dennis DeYoung, who loved the ballads and he loved the concept album and the theatrics of it all. And then you had Tommy Shaw and James Young, who were more of, hey, we're a rock band. But this dramatic success of this album, of starting it out and treating it a little more theatrically by starting out with a guy. The concert is a guy coming out and he's mopping the stage. What that led to was a even more over the top concept album, which was Kilroy Was Here. And they, like a whole section of that concert was nothing but the guys on stage acting out this story. And you listen to especially Tommy Shaw talk about that in later interviews. And he was like, we were so embarrassed. We hated that. We had costumes on and the whole thing. And all these people that came to see Styx, this rock band, all of a sudden they're at a play. And he says it was awful. They hated it. The people hated it, on and on. And he really wasn't happy about it. But Dennis DeYoung, I think partly because of the success of how this concept album had worked, that gave him free rein to say, hey, this works. We're going to make another one that works like it. And the thing that's so amazing about that, good or bad, is that Mr. Roboto, which is the one that came off of that album, became one of their biggest hits. And so, and that album sold like crazy. It's still, even though it was the thing that was the demise of the band, the reality of it is that song still to this day, you ask young people, like if you were to talk to my kids are involved, see all this stuff because they grew up around it. But still, if they had ever heard of Styx, it was because they would have heard the song Mr. Roboto. So anyway, which is more of their concept album stuff. Okay, so here we go. In an earlier interview about the album and show concept, DeYoung had explained that the real Paradise Theater opened in Chicago in 1928 and closed in 1958. This is really a concept on many levels, he said, but the major concept is that we see America at a crossroads at this point in history, and we see the album as a record either for, going back up to the top, the reindustrialization of America, or an album for the new depression. Obviously, we're hoping it'll be the first and not the latter. Okay, that's the end of his quote. The key to the concept is that the Paradise Theater symbolizes America, obviously, because of its name. And then he goes on here. America has been looked at from foreign shores as paradise, the land of opportunity with streets paved of gold, he noted. DeYoung tied that factor together with the Paradise 2 years ago after seeing a picture of the old theater, which was torn down after it closed. And then he goes on and says, it had this sign saying Paradise Closed. When I saw that, it struck a chord with me. Paradise Closed? How could that be? So DeYoung and company took that and coupled it with another album theme, the effect time has on all things. And of course, that's where you kind of throw in the concept song, Too Much Time on My Hands. And that, boy, the lyrics in that song are, in my opinion, pretty powerful. Just the message, sitting on this bar stool talking. I mean, it's the setting that they put in there. I've always really liked what they did, the concept of that song. The motto of the builders of the theater had been not for today, but for all time. But it only lasted 30 years, DeYoung pointed out. No matter what man tries to do in terms of creating something for the ages or forever, nature and time have a way of defeating that purpose. But to us, that's still no reason we shouldn't keep trying to do something that will last, even though we know things inevitably do not last. And he continues here. And so the opening of the album and show is Tonight's the Night We'll Make History as Sure as Dogs Can Fly. And if you've heard this album, you've heard that Tonight's the Night We'll Make History as Sure as Dogs Can Fly. And then it rocks into the, Rockin' the Paradise. It's actually really, really cool how they started the album and the concept there. That's our disclaimer. We'd like to make history with this album. And as a side note, in some ways they did, because this actually was one of their top selling records. And as I was saying earlier, this was kind of after that 3-album run where they were just knocking it out of the park. And then they do this, which then just took them to a whole new, in some ways, a whole new level, whole new audience. Could anybody? Okay. Nevertheless, Styx tried to make Paradise last during the concert, and after the final song had been sung, a screen was lowered and a newspaper headline flashed across the screen reading, Paradise reopens. Styx has succeeded at least for one night. It was a fitting end to a sophisticated concept that wasn't that easy to transfer to the stage, yet Styx managed to pull it off. So here's again, this was an article that somebody wrote that they actually really obviously liked the band and thought the concert and the concept and everything went over really, really well. Now, this next article, which I think I actually really liked reading this. I love reading this stuff, especially because, we're sitting here talking about the concept of time because we have all this time in between us. I mean, this came out in 80, so that was 44 years ago this album came out. And now we have the history of all the things that happened after it. And we can look back and hear what they were saying at the time, not knowing what was going to happen next. And what kind of staying power some of these things would have and not have. And it's just kind of fascinating listening to this. So, okay, so here's the headline on this one. Energetic Styx won't be denied. And it's John Bream. And this one's in the Minneapolis Star, Tuesday, July 21st, 1981 on page 16. Okay, here's the article. Styx does not like rock critics. It all but says so in the first sentence of the hugely popular rock band's official biography. Quote, Styx is consistently attacked by critics. Further evidence. Neither of the group's last two albums were mailed to critics by A&M Records, even though complimentary albums are routinely sent by the company to critics and radio stations. Moreover, Styx's New York-based press agent called the Minneapolis Star 2 weeks ago to offer an interview with one of the band members to help, quote, better prepare me to write a review of Styx's two-night sold-out stand at Met Center, which opened Monday. I declined this unprecedented kind of interview on the grounds that the music should stand on its own merits without explanation from its creators. Then the press agent called again late Monday afternoon after 6 p.m. New York time and said, I hope you're aware of the lyrical theme of Paradise Theater, Styx's current hit album, on which much of the concert is based. Said Jody Telsch of the Howard Bloom organization, which in 1976 disseminated 18 mimeograph pages of propaganda to promote the much panned, largest in the history of rock tour by ZZ Top. Most rock publicity kits consist of 2 pages. Paradise Theater, is about the reindustrialization of America, said Telsch, whose firm also represents REO Speedwagon, Todd Rundgren, Prince, Earth, Wind and Fire, and other pop stars. I had dutifully bought Paradise Theater, which has settled into the top 10 on the pop charts for the past 6 months. And after a half dozen listenings, an oral reading of the lyrics, and 2 silent ones, I still can't see the theme. Anyway, that's the guy doing the review here, saying that he's read all the lyrics and gone through all this and bought the record, and he doesn't get it. That's part of the reasons I've never picked up on Styx. For 9 albums now, the musicians have taken themselves too seriously. They try to make important statements with lyrics that have all the substance, vision, and depth of thought of those greeting cards with the sunsets on the cover. Furthermore, I can't stand Styx's shrill synthesizers and whiny 3-part vocal harmonies, which have become the group's signature. In concert, however, Styx can't be denied. The quintet's 2 and a 4th hour performance Monday was an appealing mixture of theatrics, spontaneity, energy, music, and other media. And the ovation before the encore may have been the loudest, scrolling back up to the top, one I have heard an arena concert in 14 years of concert going. It's no wonder that America's teenagers have named Styx as their favorite band in 2 consecutive Gallup polls. And no wonder the Bloom organization is touting Styx's current 96-city, 120-show tour to be seen by 1.5 million people as the biggest tour in rock's history. This veteran band from Chicago is a clever mixture of European art rock, heavy metal, boogie, and made-for-radio ballads. That's a pretty good description, I think, of Styx. Styx comes across as an amalgam of Yes, Elton John, and Lynyrd Skynyrd. In concert, the band offers perhaps the most elaborate rock staging since the Bee Gees tour of a couple of years ago. Queen and Barry Manilow mounted impressive touring productions last year that weren't quite as ambitious as Styx's. The setting is, of course, the Paradise Theater, built in Chicago in 1928 and torn down 30 years later. The Met Center stage looked like that of a legitimate theater. So now he's going on to the concert and saying similar things to what the other guy said about what he saw on the stage. As the show began, a janitor pushed a broom in front of a scrim designed to look like the back wall of a vaudeville theater. Then, accompanied by a player piano, Styx keyboardist Dennis DeYoung sang AD 1928, which is the thing that they mentioned in the other article. Tonight we make history. Okay. The overture to Paradise Theater. Suddenly, the scrim disappeared and the rest of the band joined in for the upbeat, heavy Rockin' the Paradise. For the next 2 hours, the theatrics were more consistently interesting than the songs, which suffer from similar structure, soft intro, loud and full instrumentation on the chorus, and heavy solos. And those grating harmony vocals. Stage fog, flash pots, a mirrored ball, strobes, and other lights, a blinking Paradise marquee were used tastefully. The crowning touch was the filmed closing credits, done with style and class in the manner of the opening credits of the movie Superman. The band's 3 alternating lead singers also helped to keep the show entertaining. And that's kind of an interesting thing when you think about it. Because how many bands, it used to be, when the Beatles showed up, it was all 4 of them sang. John and Paul sang probably equally as much, and then George and Ringo weren't quite as much, but still all 4 of them were involved in singing lead vocals. And there weren't a lot of other bands in the history of rock and roll that did that. Kiss, of course, is an obvious one. All 4 guys did it, and they did that intentionally to do what the Beatles were doing. But then you had a band here like Styx that did have 3 of the 5 guys that were singing lead pretty regularly. And, there were other bands that had 2. Grand Funk had, had 2 singers. Triumph had 2 singers. But there weren't a lot of that. And there's very few that ever have everybody in the band sings lead in different songs. So, okay. Guitarist James Young, they had distinct personalities. Guitarist James Young, who primped and pranced like a macho French poodle in a silver metallic jumpsuit. Tiny Tommy Shaw, the guitarist who bounced around perfectly like the cute teen idol he is fast becoming. And the friendly, purposeful ringmaster DeYoung, with loosened tie, vest, sleeve garters, pants with a stripe, and grandiose hand gestures. Bassist Chuck Panozzo, who looked like a waiter with his black bow tie and pants and white dinner jacket, provided one of the few moments of humor when he, going up to the top, let's see here, we're getting close to the end of this, donned cheap sunglasses during Too Much Time on My Hands, a bouncy new wave style song that sounded like sanitized Devo. It's kind of interesting seeing that comparison, comparing Too Much Time on My Hands to Devo, because when I go back and listen to it, it does have a little bit of that Devo flavor to it. Next came Nothing Ever Goes as Planned, which featured a nice reggae introduction. In fact, it was one of the more tuneful numbers Styx offered all night. It's featured on Paradise Theater, which may be the band's best album. The record rocks and purrs and avoids much of the familiar, annoyingly whiny sounds. Still, I find it hard to hum any of Styx's songs. Even the old hits like Lady, Babe, Renegade, and Come Sail Away, I can always remember the simple-minded lyrical refrain, but seldom the melody line. Maybe if I, and perhaps other critics, could hum more and pay less attention to lyrics, we might better understand Styx. Or maybe it would help if we critics were closer in age to the teenagers at whom the music is directed than to the 30-ish musicians who make the music. And that's the end of that article. So anyway, I find those 2 things interesting. They both actually seem to like the concert. One guy seemed to like the band more than the other guy, where he just looked at it and goes, look, this stuff is silly. I don't like this music. The lyrics are terrible. And he says something really interesting, though, that stood out to me. And I think this is a very, very important takeaway. He talks about this band, how he sees Styx as being a band that just over the years just took itself way too seriously. And it's kind of fascinating. There's so few bands that can actually really get away with that. There's something about that that's kind of a turnoff. And when you see bands, especially that were known for not taking themselves too seriously, to suddenly doing it, it makes them look silly. One of the classic examples is Kiss, when they put out The Elder. Kiss is just rock and roll. It's party, have fun, rock and roll. It's all that really ever was. And it's fun music. It's catchy, etc. But then, years and years of listening to their critics, criticizing their music. They don't even play the music. It's silly. It's just a couple of chords. The lyrics are dumb. They think to themselves, we're going to be serious musicians now. And we're going to show those critics that we really know how to write good music and have a concept. And that's when they put out The Elder. And Bob Ezrin joined in it, who had helped them put Destroyer out. And it just absolutely flopped. And in some ways became a total embarrassment for them because they're just taking themselves way too seriously. And a great example of a band that understood the importance of not doing that in more recent history is the Foo Fighters. When you look at the song, for example, one of my favorite examples is the song Learn to Fly. Learn to Fly it's not the deepest song in the world, but it's kind of thoughtful. And you listen to those lyrics and you listen to the music and it builds you up and it has this really interesting message that carries through the song, at least to me when I listen to it. And yet, when I remember hearing the song going, that is a beautiful song. And it has so much kind of interestingly kind of depth to it. But then you watch the music video and it is just, if you've never seen it, you should go watch it. Foo Fighters, Learn to Fly. And all their videos were like this. It was just goofing off. And they made this funny little story, even though the song's not really about flying an airplane. It's about flying an airplane, the video. And Jack Black's in it. And it's this silly thing where however long the song is, 3.5, 4 minutes, somebody spikes the coffee in the plane and everybody in the plane goes crazy, including the pilots. And then the Foo Fighters, Grohl and his band have to go up and take the plane over and land it safely. And it's so stupid and silly. And if you watch it, they're not taking themselves seriously for the whole thing because they're all dressed up in the costumes of the people. And it's so great because Grohl understands this thing. Even with a serious song like that, just don't take yourself too seriously because people tend to then start pushing away a little bit. And that I'm going full circle here because that is then ultimately what killed this band. Because Dennis DeYoung saw that they could succeed with this kind of concept album idea. And then he pushed it. And then they put out Kilroy Was Here. And then the concert wasn't just the janitor coming out at the beginning. It became this whole production that embarrassed everybody in the band. It turned off audiences. And then after that, they put out that live album, I think it's called Caught in the Act. And then they were gone. It was their demise. Ultimately, as the critic said, I've always thought these guys take themselves too seriously. And in some ways, taking themselves too seriously, we're going to put out this big theatrical thing, ended up being the thing that ended the band. And these things are way more complicated than that. But you see that became a catalyst that just pushed everything kind of over where they couldn't focus on the direction. They were all power struggles and all that stuff ensue. And that's how all these things go. Anyway, but if you saw them at this time, I'd love to get your feedback. If you saw this tour, if you saw this concert when they put out Paradise Theater, what that was like. Going and seeing this and having this experience. I was a little kid. I wasn't even really aware when these things were happening, but I would love to hear about this because since then I'm kind of a Styx fan. I have most of their records and I like at least a few songs on most of them, on all of them. And so I'd love to get your feedback on that. Anyway, of course, like the channel or subscribe to the channel, like the video, share your thoughts. I know there's a lot of Styx fans out there and Styx fans can be pretty passionate. So you probably know somebody that would also like this video. So share it with them. And of course, with that, have a fantastic day.